Now you can get directly involved with the show. Leave us up to 60 seconds of audio by visiting cambridgetechpodcast.com on your computer or phone and click Call the Show from the menu. Send us your news items, events to promote, leave us feedback or suggest a guest.
Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Faye. Well, we're almost at the end of January, so hopefully it's been a good month and a good start to the year for everyone. One big highlight for the Cambridge ecosystem was the Sunday Times releasing their Times 100 tech listing for the second year, with thanks to Richard Tyler and the team there. There were actually 6 Cambridge companies that made the listings: Biomodal, BitBio, Cycle Pharmaceuticals, Kigan, Monovate and Niabolt, with 5 more making the ones to watch lists, which were individuals Georgia Longobardi from Cambridge GaN Devices, Jane Osborne, Alchemab Therapeutics, and companies Cusp AI, Monumo and Riverlane. If you add up all of those companies alone, they really demonstrate the range and depth of innovation in our great city. So congratulations to all of those listed companies. So in other, more recent news, last week Syndicate Room launched the SR Carryback EIS Fund 1 to address the scale-up gap in the UK. The fund identifies the most promising companies from Syndicate Room's portfolio of 191 active startups to identify those transitioning from early-stage challenges to scalable growth. We then have a couple of people updates. First of all, Manshu Agarwal has taken on the CEO role of Houghton Bio. Manshu's track record is exactly what Houghton Bio needs, as one of his key achievements was raising $100 million to deliver an algae-based sustainable aviation fuel facility. So that sounds like perfect timing for scaling Houghton Bio's breakthrough biology for global deployment. And then friend of the podcast, Mahanthan Tillai from Curate, has made 2 impressive appointments. Dr. Stephen Bishop has been brought in as Chief Medical Officer, and another friend of the podcast, Beck Simmons, has been brought in as COO. So these appointments signal an anticipated chapter of growth for Curate. So congratulations to everyone. Next of all, we have our first voicemail input that has come from the Code Club. So here we go.
Hi both, I just wanted to call in and let you know about a new event that is starting in the Bradfield Centre in Cambridge Science Park. And what we are hosting is a code club. This is a space for young people to come and learn about coding, and we have a wonderful set of volunteers, most of who are software engineers by trade. This will be once a month on a Saturday, like I said, hosted at the Bradfield Centre. Thank you very much to them for hosting us. To find out more, if you want to go onto the codeclub.org website and search for Cambridge Science Park, our next event is the 7th of February and the 21st of March. So that is once a month on a Saturday morning at the Bradfield Centre, and look forward to seeing you all there. Thanks.
So if you'd like to leave us a message, please go to cambridgetechpodcast.com and click on the Call the Show button and leave your recording there. And lastly, TechNation have just launched their annual UK Founder and Investor Survey, which will directly inform their State of Nation report on UK tech, which will be launched at London Tech Week in June. The focus in 2026 is, unsurprisingly, navigating the UK's new AI era. Your input will help to shape policy recommendations for government and help make the UK a better place to scale tech companies. So if you need any additional motivation, you also have the chance of winning £1,000 in cash if you complete the survey. You'll get a personal invitation to the TechNation Future 50 Forum and a bespoke startup support package. So there's some additional incentive for you. You can visit TechNation for more, or James has put a page up on the bradfieldcentre.com website under community. So just follow the links from there. And now to today's episode, where we speak to the one and only Jane Hutchins.
Jane, thanks for coming on the show today. This is long overdue. Very excited for this conversation. Why don't we start by getting to know you a little bit better? So why don't we start with the early years? You know, your kind of school background. What did you want to do as a younger person?
Gosh, that's a really good question. Just opening to say I'm really pleased to be on the podcast, having seen it being recorded so many times in the Bradfield Centre. It's amazing to actually be on the other end of the big fat fuzzy microphone. So back to my school days. I grew up in South London, glorious suburbia, and I went to the same school, girls' school, for 18 years. And I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do when I grew up. I was very interested in music. I was very quiet. My favourite subject was geography, and I really messed up my A-level maths. So the upshot of all that was that I went to Portsmouth Polytechnic to read economics and geography. So playing on the geography fascination, seeing the world around you, understanding why it looks the way it does. And I actually read about Portsmouth the first time in Yachts and Yachting magazine when I was reading about the success of their team racing squad in the recent Universities Championship, where they'd come second as the guest from the humble polytechnic sector. So I actually had an amazing 3 years at Portsmouth, channeled my interest in music by joining both an opera performing group and the cathedral voluntary choir, because I was the wrong sex to go in the main choir, being a woman. And it was a glorious 3 years. It gave me confidence. I came out of my shell. I just had a great time, made lots of good friends. And from then on, I went back home to London and spent 4 years working in London, mostly in business-to-business sales to start with, but always with a high value add or particularly expensive niche service that was being offered. My very first job was in display space advertising. That was with a business computing publication in Soho. And I moved from that to selling business accounting systems, computers, into companies that mostly hadn't adopted that radical new technology. So early adopter companies. And it was really interesting seeing the journey they went on in trying this new way of running their business accounts. After 4 years in sales, I then used the same skills but transitioned into financial regulation, working for the Institute of Chartered Accountants in the city. First 4 years there, I was in the regulatory environment, and then I was promoted up into the central policy unit. And it was an absolutely fantastic employer and 2 really interesting jobs there. But again, using communication to persuade people to do something they were slightly reluctant to do, namely comply with regulations, but also that would bring them clear benefit to their businesses and their professional reputations. So it was a very interesting time. By that stage, I'd got married. We decided to start a family, and I took a 7-year career break, at the end of which I was a little bit bored. Kids were in school full-time by that stage. And I signed up with absolutely no practical skills whatsoever with the University of Southampton Temp Bank, that being where we were living at the time. And they laughed a bit and said, "You're not very useful, Jane. You know, financial regulators in the city are thin on the ground in Southampton." But eventually a job came up at this place called Southampton Science Park. And that started the major chapter of my career. The Science Park was a wholly owned subsidiary of the University of Southampton. And initially, I wasn't working in management of the park, but on the technology spin-outs from the university in their very early days when they needed professional support, but they couldn't afford it.
I mean, I love these conversations, Jane, because you find out so much. I mean, we talk about the singing and choir because there's a plethora of people that are musical orientated around Cambridge. But I love hearing your career journey and all the different roles and experiences that you've had. So let's pick up then. You're in Southampton. You've done the temp bank. This role's come up. So how did that all start? And what were the first things that you were looking at doing at Southampton Science Park?
So my very first role there was for 2 weeks, and it was helping on one particular spin out from the university that was being prepared for flotation on the AIM. It was getting the statutory books into good order, ensuring the share certificates were all correctly sequenced, which mostly meant reissuing them. And I'd been doing it for about an hour. And I have to say, I was terrified going back to work after a 7-year gap. The world of work had changed. My skills were out of date. My confidence was not quite where it had been. And the company secretary accountant for the science park suddenly looked at me and said, "You understand the jargon. How come?" And the backstory to that was that while I worked for the Institute of Chartered Accountants, I had qualified as a company secretary in order to give me validity speaking to highly qualified professionals. And John was delighted. John at Southampton was thrilled because it meant that I understood what he was doing. Also, those skills could be applied usefully in looking at company formation, registering new companies at Companies House, doing the annual returns. I picked up conversations with making tax returns for early stage investors, phoning the tax office for guidance because I didn't know how to do it. So I was just useful. And my 2-week placement turned into 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, when I'd been working on quite a portfolio of spin-outs, there was a change in leadership at Southampton and a change in leadership purpose as well. And the new CEO, Peter Burkett, joined from Kinetic. And he and I got on very well as individuals. And he decided it was time to formalise my relationship with the science park, put me on a proper employment contract, and sadly stopped me getting every single school holiday off as unpaid leave, which was fine. You know, I had grandparents who could step up, fortunately, for childcare, and the kids were old enough to go into summer camp and the like and have a really good time. But Peter really gave me a really impressive opportunity to join the company, to learn more about science park management and to become the company secretary of the science park. And it was a role that I really, really enjoyed. Again, my confidence grew as I went through. And my very early stage experience in business-to-business sales actually came into great use because gradually, as I learnt the ropes on the legal side of things, I also transitioned into selling the space and sharing the space and negotiating lease contracts and so forth with the companies that were wanting to move on to the park.
I think as well for women listening and the going back to work, like we talked to Amelia Miller from Evie, she has a whole system that is about getting women back into work and building that confidence. So first of all, thank you for sharing that. And second of all, I mean, what a great portfolio way of getting back into work, doing those multiple projects within Southampton Science Park. So then what happened? You end up in Cambridge. So how did that transition happen?
It took about 18 years. I was at Southampton for a very long time. I ended up as their business development director. And by that stage, I was beginning to speak on conferences and indeed on other podcasts, getting the voice of what science parks are there to do out into the general conversation. And I think at that stage, I was ready for a change. And I knew that there weren't going to be science park management opportunities coming up in the Southampton or southern area that I was aware of through the network. And I just got this call out of the blue on behalf of Cambridge Science Park saying, we're looking for a new director to succeed Jeanette Walker, who'd done a brilliant job as the first director of the science park, but had moved to another newer science park in Cambridge to set them on their journey. And honestly, I had never thought of moving to Cambridge. I'm a Londoner by upbringing, and my vague thoughts have been maybe I'd go back to London. It's easier to go to the opera when you live there. So that's as far as I'd got in terms of where I might like to live. But I very sensibly thought, well, let's at least have a conversation. And of course, the reputation of the Cambridge ecosystem was very well known. I worked with people who had insight into what made Cambridge different, and they talked quite openly to me about that when I was down in Southampton. So I thought, well, I'll have a conversation. And if I'm completely honest, I never actually expected to be offered this role, but I was, and I'm absolutely thrilled that I was, because as I went through the interview process, I got more and more invested into it, and I knew that it was a role that would suit me. I knew it was a role where I could make a real difference, and it's just so exciting being in one of the world's most famous tech-led cities.
Fabulous. So you kind of teased up nicely the next kind of topic area that we'd like to explore, which, I mean, we've got quite a diverse audience, so we shouldn't make any assumptions on their knowledge levels. So can we go to the kind of bigger picture piece around, what are science parks? They come in lots of different sizes and flavours. You touched on, what is the purpose of a science park? So talk us through that, from your perspective, what are they and why are they important?
I'm glad you give me the opportunity to explain that. I quite often get to speak to groups of students, both undergrad and postgrad, who are sent to the Bradfield Centre or to a college within Cambridge with a question. You're an instruction to learn about science parks, and I always start by asking the audience what they think a science park is. Mostly the answers are, they contain elements of the truth, but they're not quite nailing it. So a science park is fundamentally a property asset. It's a built environment, buildings where companies can locate themselves, pay rent, but it will always have some sort of policy filter on it so that the companies based on it have to be operating in a certain sector. Those filters are often enshrined in a planning condition. So when the local authority gives consent for a science park to be developed or extended, then they will impose a condition on that, either through a Section 106 requirement, which is just a legal document that's common in planning, that will say all the companies based on this park, for example, must be involved in original research and development or the commercialisation of R&D. And most science parks are allowed a very small percentage, maybe 5 to 10% of their floor area, which can be occupied by companies that are supporting the commercialisation of R&D. The benefit of a science park is that it brings a very specialist community of like-minded individuals together, and it is shown that companies that start their journey on science parks or continue their journey within them have a greater chance of success as a business. Their failure rate is lower. And in a sector where there are a lot of risks taken with novel ideas, be they in technology or life science or drug therapeutics, whatever it might be, it's a risky endeavour. Not all companies will succeed. And it's very important those companies have easy access to really good quality business support, mentoring, guidance, and indeed investment to help them on their journey.
And I know you're part of the Science Park Association, is that right? UXPAR?
Yes.
So is there commonality in the approach of science parks around the country or even internationally? Are there themes? What do you see in that national or global picture?
Yes, I'm a non-executive director of the UK Science Park Association and have been for the past year. There are definitely commonalities. There are common factors all around the world that make a science park. What varies hugely is the operating model, the ownership model. Some are very heavily subsidised by national governments. Some have local government subsidy. Some have absolutely no subsidy whatsoever. In the early days in the UK, the Science Park Association was formed of 8 members in the mid-1980s. And they were, I think it's safe to say, quite lonely individuals because they were running these newfangled things that nobody quite understood. And importantly, nobody really knew what the important decisions were that you had to take and the important elements that you had to provide within a science park to attract the right companies and retain them and enable their development to be successful. So the Science Park Association was formed as a peer-to-peer support group, and it was termed a movement. So talk to the old guard, if you like, in UK science park circles, and they talk about the science park movement. And I think that's a wonderful phrase because it shows that we all acted to common purpose. We're a very collaborative bunch. We share ideas. We share what's worked for us in Southampton, in Cambridge, in Leicester, in Scotland, wherever you might be. You've got all these different science parks all trying to do the very best for the communities they serve and needing help. And the help they need is kind of quirky, actually. Science parks are niche environments. And by coming together on a regular basis and sharing what we know, what we understand, and the challenges we see, not only as operators of science parks, but the challenges, crucially, that we see our occupiers, the companies in our communities, facing on a day-to-day basis, means we can ensure we're better positioned to help them in a really practical way. And again, improve their chances of success.
So putting you on the spot here, it went from 8 initially. So how many science parks are there across the UK?
That's a really difficult question to answer. There are about 140 full members of the UK Science Park Association. The reason it's hard to answer precisely is the definition of a science park has evolved. So whereas initially we were all very self-contained environments, often out of town in the countryside, there's been an urbanisation trend seen in the sector. More and more people want their science businesses to be located, yes, in a supportive community, but also in a sustainable community where their talent, the staff that work for the companies on site, can travel to and from work easily, not always in a car, accessing public transport, but also accessing other networking, business networking, science networking opportunities close at hand. So we're now seeing the growth not just of science parks, but of innovation districts, where you might see an area which combines commercial space, retail space, and residential space, all within one area, but operating loosely as an innovation district, where you see this clustering of science and technology businesses.
Yeah, we're certainly getting one of those here around Wellcome Genome Campus, where it is much more integrated, isn't it? So that brings me on to the question about Cambridge specifically. So I think there's something like, and I know they're not all science parks, some are business parks, and it goes back to your comment about they've all got different roles and purposes and terms and all of those kinds of things. But what is it like being one science park in the midst of around another 25? Is it competitive? Is it collaborative? How does it actually work?
Yes, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, a normal city's lucky to have a science park. Cambridge has got so many, you can barely keep count. I suppose on a very basic level, yes, we compete with each other because we all want to attract the new company that's out there looking for where it's going to base its business. But actually, we work very closely together as a group. We have something called the Forum for Place, which is supported both by Cambridge University Health Partners, which is based down on the biomedical campus to the south of the city, and the Combined Authority, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. And it's a Chatham House Rules forum where the operators of actual science parks, not science parks that might be developed in 5 years' time, we come together and we share information on our plans, challenges we're facing, projects that we're implementing. We get politicians, MPs to come and speak to us. We recently had the head of the Joint Planning Service for Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire, who came and led a fantastic workshop session for us one afternoon on what does good look like. It's something we're all very concerned to deliver here. It's not just about building labs and offices to house science and technology businesses. It's about creating the right environments, the sustainable environments, the best quality workplaces. And in order to do that, we need to be economically viable as places ourselves, irrespective of how we are owned or how we are funded. And as part of that sustainability, we'd like to avoid duplicating amenity offer. So as well as providing space, we will provide at varying levels, cafes, transport links, sports facilities and so forth. And we all know we want to do more. And the best way to do that is to collaborate. And on a very local scale, just in North East Cambridge, around Cambridge North Station, where Cambridge Science Park is based, along with St John's Innovation Centre, Cambridge Business Park, and the new building going up with Cadan's Life Science on the junction by the Cambridge Science Park, we are all speaking openly about what we can and can't provide as individual estates and how we can collaborate together to lift the whole district and improve the whole community up here.
Just before I hand over to James, one question there. So you made a comment there that said the existing parks, not the ones that are in development or being proposed. And let's face it, I assume that there are quite a lot of speculative propositions for those new types of parks. Do you also, as a group, go, actually, we don't have one of those? Do you influence any up-and-coming propositions at all?
We certainly discuss it. I'm not sure I could confidently claim influence in that context. Again, a question I get asked, particularly by overseas delegations who are coming to Cambridge as a city to learn how to replicate our success in their own countries. A question I'm frequently asked is, how do you target companies to come onto Cambridge Science Park? How do you target which sectors you want to see clustering here? And the answer is that we don't, as the Science Park. We are very proud of the fact that we're a home to a wide variety of businesses, ranging from deep tech, quantum AI, through to drug discovery, medtech, biotech, cancer therapy. There's a huge range, sustainable businesses as well, looking at alternatives to petrochemicals and plastics. So it's a very, very wide group, but they all have this innovation obsession in common, this passion for it, which is wonderful. But we don't target specific sectors. What we do find is that we can see there are gaps where we're struggling to fulfill demand in specific sectors. And sometimes that isn't just down to what's on the science park. It can be down to local infrastructure. So we extend the conversations out into conversations around housing, about public transport, about data capacity, water capacity, power capacity, and so forth.
It's great timing to get you on because, of course, this year we're celebrating the 55th anniversary of the Cambridge Science Park. That's pretty incredible. And a couple of episodes ago, Faye and I shared that we were at the event that was at the Bradfield recently to mark that occasion. So over 55 years, there must be some great stories and some anecdotes and some history to share. So why don't we drill in a little bit deeper into just the history of Cambridge Science Park, how it started, some of the companies that have been here, some of the innovations that have been invented here.
Sure. And thank you for the congratulations. And I'm delighted you came to our event and enjoyed it. The follow-up chat on social media was very exciting to see. And the buzz in the room was just amazing. So I'm thrilled you enjoyed it. I did hear your conversation on the episode, on your reflections on the messaging that you particularly tuned into. So yes, Cambridge Science Park, the first in the UK, hotly followed by Heriot Watt a year later. We were founded by Trinity College in 1970. And the land that the Science Park sits on has been in Trinity College's ownership as long as there has been a Trinity College. So that's since 1546. Which is an unusual narrative for a science park. It's usually an acquired piece of land. So you have to get the old history context in there. Originally, we were a farm, and we served as a farm for centuries, providing food and income to help college feed its staff and its students, but also to contribute to its running costs and to contribute to the costs of the university. So we are part of Trinity College's investment portfolio, which is called the endowment. Fast forward to 1970, and we're no longer an active farm. There were redundant railway sidings on here, which were no longer in active use. They were just left on the land. And I'm told we had a lot of US Army tanks dotted about the place that were being stored here. After World War II, you had to clear the battlefields of Europe, and the tanks had to go somewhere. And honestly, that had never occurred to me until I came here. And where some of them went was Cambridge Science Park. So it wasn't a particularly attractive site. It was on the edge of the city, almost on the outskirts of the city. And Trinity looked at this particular property asset in conjunction with their long-term property investment advisors, Bidwell's, who are, again, a Cambridge-based company, and decided something needed to be done. They looked across to the example being forged in America at Stanford with the world's first science park, which interestingly also originated as an opportunity to make use of some underperforming property that had been left vacant following a reorganisation, I think, of the Homeland Defence Team, as it's now called. But there were empty buildings and there was a need. And Stanford had identified that academics within really good research-led institutions and universities want to see benefit, real-world impact of their research. If you stay in the academic environment, that's usually measured through some sort of research assessment framework, which sees how many mentions you've had in peer-reviewed articles, what publications your academics have come out with, and so forth. But there's also an opportunity to commercialise some of that knowledge and to parcel up the intellectual property and put it into a company. And it was thought, correctly as it turns out, that if you created a soft landing zone for those university spin-outs, as we now call them, then you could help them as they started their journey through into commercialisation. You could provide a protected environment. You could provide favourable lease terms that maybe strictly commercial operators would be reluctant to offer. Shorter-term leases, easier to break. They're not as valuable to the landowner or the building owner, but they're very, very useful and very valued by the companies that are in that early stage journey. And Trinity looked at what was going on in America and realised there was a really good opportunity to try the same thing in the UK. So in a sense, we were an innovative project. We were the first science park. It was not a case of sticking a finger in the air to see which way the wind was blowing. It was a very carefully considered and researched decision. But it was definitely a bit of a risk to take. Unfortunately, that risk really paid off, not just for Trinity, but for the City of Cambridge. Because at the same time that Trinity was exploring options around setting up a science park, the UK central government was beginning to talk. You think back to Harold Wilson's really famous speech just before he became leader of the Labour Party and then Prime Minister, where he talked about British industry adopting the white heat of technology and looking to the future. This creation of the science park all played into that narrative. It was the right time to be taking a risky decision.
I mean, it must have been really bold, though. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that meeting. And I'm thinking about Shai as well. So he's running this University of Cambridge library project where he's collating all of the history of what happened.
Yes.
You know, there must be papers of having those discussions and what people, do you know what people's opinions were? Were the people going, this is, you know, really innovative, let's go for it? Or was it much more conservative because it was just land-based again?
I'm really pleased you mentioned that, the Cambridge History of Innovation project. I was at the launch meeting at Cambridge University Library, and it was one of those real Cambridge newcomer moments for me where I thought, why am I here? You know, I was surrounded by absolute legends of the sector.
We were there as well. Do we count?
Not as legends.
No, not as legends. Okay.
We were wondering why we were there as well.
Sorry, Jane.
It was remarkable. And the Nobel laureate I was sitting next to round the table said, I'm really sorry, but I don't understand why we're here. I don't understand what assets you're looking for this archival project tracking a very long history of innovation in Cambridge. And they had this slightly smug Cambridge moment where they said, yes, we anticipated that question. Come and look at this side table and we'll show you what we have. And they had original drawings and calculations by Newton. They had letters from Stephen Hawking. They had a page of company accounts written out in a big account book, really old school, sort of in ink, and with a counter signature from Rutherford saying, I certify this is an accurate representation of our accounts. And I was honestly somewhat overwhelmed to be in a room with those physical assets as well as with the people around the table. But it made the point that Cambridge has been innovating, particularly in math, science and technology for a very, very long time. Yeah, seeing that whole journey come through and being part of the recording of that journey, I think is very, very important.
Technology moves fast, and now so can you. Discover Polestar, the all-electric performance brand vehicles redefining how we drive. Precision engineering, minimalist design, and software that evolves with you. Experience it at Holden Group in Norwich and Bury St Edmunds, or let us bring the test drive to your door. Proud sponsors of the Cambridge Tech Podcast. Polestar, electric performance redefined. Discover at holdengroup.co.uk/Polestar.
I learned at the 55th anniversary event that Cambridge Consultants were, I think, the second tenant on the science park. I mean, they alone have invented some really incredible things while they've been here.
They've been amazing, not just as tenants on the park, but as contributors to the Cambridge ecosystem. Our very first tenant, apparently, was a specialist glass blowing company. So very much on the manufacturing side of science and research. But Cambridge Consultants were second in and are still with us, which is great. And they've spun out, I think, 20 different companies into the Cambridge ecosystem over the decades, many of which themselves have gone on to be very, very significant in what they have invented and created and commercialised. But yeah, Cambridge consultants have a very special place for us. I loved the demonstration at the 55th where they were talking about what is AI and how AI has evolved just over the last couple of years. And it's phenomenal. But seeing them then progress onto the challenges of human-machine understanding.
And again, just jumping back to, I guess, maybe giving Trinity some credit. I mean, obviously the Bradfield Centre is named after John Bradfield, who obviously was the senior bursar who was responsible for getting all of this off the ground. But when you think about visionary, not only just the initiative to actually build the park in the first place, but being very aware of the green space and actually making sure it just wasn't a massive lump of concrete. And I mean, well, always that's paid off, but post-pandemic, when people actually do see the value in green space and fresh air and nature, the foresight there is incredible.
It really is. And I think you look at everything around this science park, if you come and visit it, there's a ring road that runs inside the estate. And it looks quite urban, it looks quite developed. But if you get out of your car and walk into the central area, we've got lakes, we've got fountains, we've got wooded areas, we've got an enormous variety of wildlife. And because we've created that infrastructure over the last 55 years and we cherish it, it's always been an attractive feature. But you're right, James, the pandemic made us all wake up to the health benefits, the well-being benefits of access to green space. And we've all moved on to cherishing it more overtly, I think, since the pandemic. Being brutal, it's a commercially sensible thing to do because companies want to bring their staff into the best quality workplaces available. And they understand that that is necessary, even in what is now an urban setting for the science park. But we're progressing through our plans for the future into regarding ourselves not just as a science park, but as a park of science, really overtly welcoming the public onto the estate so they can not only share those green spaces, but also have the opportunity to understand the amazing advances that are being brought forward into the world to the benefit of everyone from the companies on this park.
And it's great to see that the nature side of things is forming a big piece of the community work that your team does, like the nature walks, the bat watching and all of those kinds of things. It just brings people together, doesn't it?
That's right. We have monthly wildlife walks here in conjunction with the local wildlife trust. And they are so popular. You have to book pretty early to get onto those. And they're seasonal as well. So if you go around in the autumn, we'll be looking at fungi, which is one of my favourites. The bat walks obviously can't happen at lunchtime. They have to happen in the evening when the bats are lively. And we try to strike a real balance between meeting the commercial needs of companies, but also cherishing the green spaces because their staff love them so much. And the other thing I've done a lot of quite recently is engaging with school children. So we've had some Year 6 and Year 10 children coming onto the park as part of actually a planning consultation exercise that's run through the local planning service called the Youth Engagement Scheme, or YES. And they're one of only 5 local authorities in the whole country that actively seek input from the adults of the future. And it also gives us a chance through the workshops we do over a number of days with these school children to talk to them about career opportunities, not just in STEM, but in the support services such as, do you want to build a science park? You could be a planner, you could be a surveyor, you could be a landscape gardener, you could be an accountant. We talk to them about our careers. Oddly, nearly all of us on the team have studied geography at university, so I found my tribe. But it's great to have the chance to talk to the children. And I mean, I was just on a personal level absolutely thrilled. The first group I took round, who are from Mayfield Primary here in North East Cambridge, we saw 2 kingfishers fly alongside the pond. Now, I'd heard that there were kingfishers on the park. I'd never seen them. I've seen lots of other wildlife, just not the kingfishers. So for 2 of them to turn up out the back of the Bradfield Centre in this amazing blaze of metallic turquoise on a gloomy, slightly damp day was just fantastic. And the children were so inspired.
It's interesting how the park has reinvented itself in some ways over the years as well, because obviously when it was originally conceived, it was individual companies in individual buildings and probably little interaction between them. Obviously, community plays a big role moving forward. When you talk about being an attractive place for people to work and spend time, the Bradfield Centre was conceived to have that kind of openness to it. You know, the cafes open to everyone, the events that we put on are open to everyone. And of course, more recently, the Science Centre has opened, which is bringing a completely different demographic into the Science Centre. So how do you see that evolving, you know, over time?
All science parks have tended to be insular. Many of them are gated, and they've actively kept the public out for all sorts of reasons. It could be because there were sensitive operations going on site. It could just be they were traditionally a gated community in the grounds of a country estate, and the gates have never gone. Cambridge Science Park has never been properly gated. There's always been open access. But it's fair to say that it doesn't feel open. It doesn't feel as welcoming as I believe genuinely that we are. One of the very first conversations I had when I joined the team here in August 2022 was with Cambridge Science Centre, which is a children's STEM education charity. It had been going in Cambridge for just under 10 years at that stage. And it was a get-to-know-you meeting. You know, their CEO and their marketing director at the time came to see me. Becca is now the CEO. And at the end of the meeting, when we'd agreed to work together and I said we'd look into funding a science project in a local junior school on the subject of the school children and their teachers' choice, so we weren't being prescriptive. At the end of that meeting, the then CEO very cheekily asked, what we really need is a new home where we can store all our exhibits and our equipment, and crucially, families and school children can come to us as well as us going out into their schools. How about it? And I thought, you know, that would be absolutely amazing, but I didn't think I had any chance of getting that decision through Trinity College. I was completely wrong. And I'll own that error of my ways very openly. I spoke to Trinity and they were having the same conversation in-house that we were having here, and basically saying the park needs to do more to the local community, the people who are our actual neighbours here in North East Cambridge, in King's Hedges and Abbey and Chesterton. And to cut a very long and intense story short, Trinity have provided a home for the Cambridge Science Centre. We've put it in the Trinity Centre, which was an existing building here, that's been on the redevelopment list for quite a while. Currently it houses a cafe, a jiu-jitsu club, and it used to have conferencing spaces that were really quite old-fashioned. They were great when they were designed, but needs had evolved. And we've repurposed that into a fantastic home for Cambridge Science Centre. This year alone, and they've only been open about 16 months, I think, maybe 18 now, they've seen more than 35,000 visitors cross their threshold. Now, if that isn't opening up the science park to outsiders, I don't know what is. But more importantly, it's opening the minds of those very young people in junior school and early senior school age groups to the amazing opportunities and fun that they can have through engaging with science, with engineering, with the potential choice of their GCSE subjects, so we can keep them engaging academically through their education as well. And they will form the workforce of the future. And if they can see that there are great opportunities for them in a really diverse range of jobs on a place like a science park, ideally the science park on their doorstep so they can just walk to work or hop on a bike, what have you, then that really opens up opportunities for them. But it also benefits the companies on the park. Science and technology companies choose where to locate on the basis of talent. So they bring huge benefits to the people geographically close to where they choose to locate. There's a real misconception that the talent they want is somebody with a PhD. Clearly, that's very useful for the IP generation. But you also need creative thinking, you need practical thinking, you need accountancy skills, you need a plethora of different mindsets, so you have a truly diverse workforce, which again goes right back to where this conversation started. It helps those companies to thrive, it helps them to succeed, and in turn, that grows not only the local economy, but the national economy as well.
You can definitely hear the passion for it, I think, and it's a real inherent thing with Trinity College and the Science Park and the Bradfield Centre to actually bring all the communities together, and I think no one would question that. And I think it's a really interesting point as well that you spend the time bringing the companies into it as well, so that they understand what their footprint is on a local basis as well. So no, I think it's brilliant. Now, no one would have missed the fact that there's a lot of development going on the Science Park alone. So let's just finish with telling us a little bit about what the development plans are and what your vision is for the next 5-10 years.
Sure. I'll just pick up on one thing you said there about the importance of the role of Trinity. Because when you engage with Trinity, they are very open at a very senior level in saying how proud they are of the Science Park. And that absolutely shines through from them as well, not just in terms of their bursary team, but from the Master and Fellows right down into students who are blown away that their college owns something as dynamic and exciting as the Science Park, and of course, crucially, by the opportunities that they have to engage and to give back, not just through working here and job opportunities, but engaging with the Cambridge Science Centre. So there's a project now between college and the Science Centre to bring students out to work with children, which is just wonderful. Great. So yes, our plans for the future. Well, being the first park, we have some buildings that I say are historic, are legacy buildings. James is laughing, and I don't blame him. I actually feature them in some of my presentations because I'm proud of our early roots. They're single-storey sheds. They're kind of mustard colour. They're a bit leaky. They let rain in and energy out, and they're not fit for purpose. Although I have to caveat that by saying some of the commercialisation of technology that is coming out to this day from the companies based in those buildings is superb. So you don't have to have a swanky building, but nowadays companies tend to like certainly much more high-performing buildings and better work environments for their lovely teams. The regeneration and the redevelopment of the park in its current phase really got underway with this building where we're speaking today, with the Bradfield Centre, which is a fantastic piece of architecture, as well as housing an amazing community of innovators within the tech space. And so much so that it's become quite an icon in the region for, it's shorthand really, isn't it, for innovative tech companies. I notice when they get funding announcements, they're often photographed with the wonderful piece of hanging art.
Even if they're not actually here.
Yes, exactly. I'm glad you said that. It's like, who are these companies? But they know that image visually gives them credibility, not just with investors, but with their customers and suppliers as well. And it's great to see the success of the Bradfield Centre. The next phase was at the entrance of the park. We've got some fantastic buildings, particularly units 1 and 2, and swinging round into the Bio Innovation Centre owned by Tuss Park, which does a similar thing to the Bradfield. It's co-working space for life science companies, including lab space. Very flexible, and there's a lovely steady trickle of companies coming out of that building and spreading not only onto our science park, but also across the Cambridge ecosystem, according to their needs. So that's the evidence of what we've done so far. COVID slightly got in the way of all that, so some plans were stalled. So we have a couple of sites where you can see buildings have been taken down, where that was the right thing to do. We're also renovating and repurposing existing buildings. So one of the things that's very important to acknowledge is it's not just about knocking down a building when it's a certain number of years old and slapping up a new one. That's usually the easiest and the cheapest thing to do. But nowadays we are very mindful of sustainability. And sustainability is not just about the green spaces. It's not just about clean energy. It's about looking at the carbon embedded within these existing structures. So we've done a repurposing of a building, Unit 316, which formerly it was just a standard office environment, perfectly fine for its time, but slightly time expired. And it was ripe for redevelopment. But we ran a carbon equation as part of the financial modelling behind it. And this is something Trinity holds extremely dear to its heart and is very serious about. And the result of that modelling was that we were not to demolish the building, we were to significantly refurbish it. The ground floor is now labs, the first floor is offices, and it looks fantastic. People tend to think that repurposed office space is a bit tatty, a bit not so much second-hand, but it doesn't look as good as it can. But I think 316 is a great example of just how fresh and how new and how modern you can make a refurbished space look. But that's all short-term, which is important. But we also, because we're owned by Trinity, which takes an extraordinarily long view of its investment horizons and its commitment to an area, they are looking to what the Science Park will look like in 30 to 50 years. And as part of that, last year, we went through a very extensive process to create, slightly surprisingly, our first ever master plan for Cambridge Science Park. We're not starting with a blank canvas, so we can't just give an architect free rein and say, create a world-class science park of the future. Because we have buildings here, Cambridge consultants, who we discussed earlier, might be a bit upset if we said we want to put a car park in the centre of your robotics lab space. Clearly, we would never want to do that. But we also want to take into account the future needs of companies, the future needs of the local community, the wider community, and the ambitions of our neighbours as well. So the master plan is setting certain provisions. So how high could we go? How many buildings do we need on the science park? There's an enormous amount behind it, as you would expect, of transport modelling, energy modelling, water modelling, wastewater disposal modelling, you name it. There's a lot of work that goes on. But what we're presenting and what we've consulted on in 2025 is a zoned master plan, which will see the park grow gradually over the next 30 years plus, from its existing floor area of 2.3 million square foot to up to 10 million square feet. But the important thing to hang on to in all of that is that doesn't mean we're losing our green space. So the built area of the estate will still only be a third of the land. And we will have this fantastic green space, which we will cherish and we will enhance, and we will enhance the biodiversity, which, by the way, is incredibly difficult because we already have a very biodiverse area. But we want it to be even better. And we want to make it more overtly welcoming to the local community. And we're talking about, getting back to this Park of Science theme, about putting science-themed play equipment in the public areas. So the families who already come on to walk their dogs and ride their bikes and just exercise at the weekends can actually engage more. Again, bringing young people in and showing them how interesting scientific play can be, and just get them fully engaged with this at a young age and welcome them. I mean, Faye, you mentioned my obvious passion for the sector. I adore science parks, and it took me a very, very long time to realise that I'd found my tribe in the companies that inhabit them. And if I can see more people coming onto Cambridge Science Park, then personally I'm really happy. But crucially, our owners and our key investors are also very, very keen to see that opening of the science park.
Amazing. I mean, what a great conversation that was. How do people get involved in the science park? And they're hearing this, they might want to bring their companies here, they might want to bring their children to the science centre. Where should they go for more information?
I suppose the obvious answer always is check out our website and our social media channels. We're a small team that run the science park, so whatever your question, just find one of us. I mean, I've got quite a visible profile because I keep cropping up at events. So contact me if I can't help you. I can always put you in touch with the right people. We're always interested in conversations with companies that want to be based here. And sometimes those conversations can spread on for years because of the nature of their growth. Talk to us sooner rather than later. And then you can establish whether we are the right fit for you and whether you're the right fit for us. It's always a conversation. For the families, Cambridge Science Centre have their own website. They are open almost every day of the year, I think. Hopefully they'll get a break at Christmas, but they are open 7 days a week. So quite often during the week, during term time, you'll see school parties in there having lessons with their science teachers, their science leads. But at weekends, the Science Centre is open to the public. Do book before you come because it is very popular. And gosh, I mean, it's just great. It's well worth it. I think my favourite sight was in one of the launch events. I saw a Nobel laureate and unicorn founder playing with one of the exhibits. And I thought that is just brilliant that even somebody of that calibre is getting fun. Most of the time, of course, I just see children in there having a whale of a time and experimenting with wind, with gears, with power, with gravity, with light, with AI. It's fantastic.
Amazing. Well, thanks for taking the time out to speak to us today.
It's been great fun. Thank you very much to you both.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.